Fine grace, AC, all glories to some, all glories, all glories to some, all glories to Shish. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Agyanatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Amilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guru Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Sapitam Yena Bhutale Vayam Rupaka Damayam Tati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhunam Harijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. So I thought that we might discuss or review the Chaitanya Charitamrita, especially the Madhya Lila, chapter 3, which is about that period of time just after Lord Chaitanya took sannyas. So the Chaitanya Charitamrita, written by Krishnadas Kaviraj, is a look into the life of Lord Chaitanya, particularly his philosophy. And many things that happened in Lord Chaitanya's life are instructive for us, and they help us to understand the spiritual world. And by listening to the accounts of the devotees' interaction, particularly the Panchatattva, 5 features of Srimad Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we can get a sense of how things move in the spiritual world. And one of the things that's interesting is that we discover that, quite surprisingly, that in this discussion or in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there are many instances where we find that the devotees joke around, which, I don't know, you don't really hear much of in other religious scriptures. And it also seems surprising that devotees tell very tall stories, which is another thing you probably wouldn't expect. So, of course, Lord Chaitanya was only with us in this spirit world for 48 years. And right in the middle of his life, when he was 24 years old, he took sannyas, which happened, of course, in a city called Katwa. And the reason that Lord Chaitanya took sannyas was because people did not respect people who were householders, because familiarity breeds contempt. So in general, the people in general did not pay much attention to householders, even if they were very advanced, even if they were very powerful. Lord Chaitanya was, for the most of his life up to this point, a very sort of aggravating scholar, and he used to make people annoyed with his various interpretations and questions. But of course, that all changed when he took initiation from Ishwar Puri, and he began to preach Krishna consciousness. And then people would hear him chanting and they would become inspired. But one time, Lord Chaitanya was chanting the names of the gopis, and one student chastised Lord Chaitanya for chanting names of the gopis instead of chanting Krishna's name. And Lord Chaitanya became angry and chased the student with a stick. And the student went to his friends and said, this Chaitanya is a madman, and so he doesn't even fear harming a Brahmana. This shows how it's quite common in our world that superficial things are focused on and deep, actual spiritual things are ignored. This is quite common. People focus in on and recognize superficial things, and they don't recognize the actual real nature. And our world is designed to allow this. So Lord Chaitanya, after thinking about it, decided he needed to take sannyas so that people would respect his position as a sannyasi. He did this, again, surprisingly. He took initiation from a Mayavad sannyas, of all things. The sannyas ashram at that point was basically the property of Mayavadi sannyas because Krishna consciousness had degraded. Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita that whenever and wherever this knowledge is lost, and so progressively the process of spiritual life does tend to get covered over. And in this case, it was covered over to the point where essentially there were very few Vaishnavas, and ones that were very sincere and very pure Vaishnavas were overlooked by people in general. Instead, people paid attention to these Mayavad sannyasis who carried one danda ekadam. So these sannyasis were following an order that was created by Sankaracharyas. Sankaracharya, Adi Sankara, traveled throughout India, and also Sankaracharya didn't live very long either. He left the world at a very young age. But he managed to establish 4 main months. And he taught this principle of merging with the one, which is a principle that many people still find important, even though it's not given any importance in the Vedic literature. According to the Vedas, we find that there are 3 aspects of the Supreme, that is Vedanti Tattva Vyajnana Advayam Brahmeti Paramapeti Bhagavaniti Shabdite. The non-dual Supreme is understood in 3 features as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So Brahman is this all-pervasive, formless feature of the Supreme. Then there's Paramatma, the localized feature of the Supreme in the heart of every living being. And Bhagavan, his feature as the Supreme Lord, enjoying for himself, by himself. And this is a feature that is actually important. And this is the feature that spoke to Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita. This is the feature that Vaishnavas worship, not the super soul, which is the target of the yogis, and not the Brahman, which is the target of the Jnanis, who follow this Mayavada conception of trying to merge with the Supreme. The living entities are eternal, so they are Jiva Buddha Sanatana, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. They exist eternally, and they can appear to merge with the Supreme, but actually that merging is not complete and absolute, because the living entity is eternally a fragment of Krishna. So eventually the living entity comes out of that merge and again begins material life. So the only permanent platform is to become a servant of the Supreme, which is what Lord Chaitanya taught. So Lord Chaitanya, he took sannyas at age 24, Shukla Paksha, of the month of Magh. And Lord Chaitanya decided that he would visit Vrindavan, and there he would take up his permanent residence, and he would meditate on the Supreme Lord in seclusion in Vrindavan. That was Lord Chaitanya's plan, but it was not to happen. He would visit Vrindavan eventually, but not at this time, and he would not set up his permanent location there. That would be changed, as we will find out in this particular chapter. So Lord Chaitanya set out, we find out, to go to Vrindavan, but because Lord Chaitanya was in the mood of ecstasy, he was unable to discern which direction was which direction. So he just wandered. And not only that, he was so much lost in ecstasy, he didn't even know whether it was day or night. And so as he wandered, trying to make his way to Vrindavan, he would meet various cowherds who were tending cows. And they would see him, and since he was chanting and singing, they would chant and sing, and he would say, "Go on, please go on chanting this way." So Lord Chaitanya would enthuse them and encourage them in this way. This was, as we know, Lord Chaitanya came to give the Yuga Dharma. And the age of Kali Yuga is chanting the holy name. Have Kritya Dhyayato Vishnu Dvapare Kritya Dhyayato Vishnu Tretiyam Yajato Lakai Dvapare Paricharyayam Kalarya Kirtana. So in Kritya Yuga or Satya Yuga, the process is meditation. In Treta Yuga, the process is fire yoga. In Dwapara Yuga, the process is deity worship. And in Kali Yuga, there's only one process that's actually effective. That is the process of chanting the holy name. So Lord Chaitanya's Yuga avatar, he came to give this process. And now he's engaged in the practice of actually doing that. So Nityananda was tagging along with Lord Chaitanya, and Nityananda had a different idea. He went to various cowherd men who were ahead of Lord Chaitanya. So Nityananda went up ahead of Lord Chaitanya, and whoever he would meet, he said, "If you meet Lord Chaitanya, tell him that the path that he wants, the path to go to the Yamuna, tell him it's in the other direction, that actually point to the Ganges." So evidently Nityananda made up some persuasive lie to tell to the cowherd men and convince them that this was the appropriate thing to do. And when Lord Chaitanya would come, they all directed him in the wrong way. So he was convinced he was on the way to Vrindavan. And eventually, Lord Chaitanya caught up to Nityananda and he said, "Nityananda, what are you doing?" He said, "I'm following you to Vrindavan." And so Lord Chaitanya said, "Well, if you're following me to Vrindavan, how far away is Vrindavan?" And Nityananda said, "Oh, look, here is the Jamuna River." He was pointing to the Ganges, but he said, "This is the Jamuna River." And Lord Chaitanya then immediately felt very ecstatic, and he began to offer a prayer that describes Jamuna. "Oh, my dear Jamuna, you are the one who gives love to Krishna, and you are very auspicious. Please deliver us from all of our sins and give us shelter." So Lord Chaitanya offered this prayer. And meanwhile, Nityananda had other plans. He had met Chandrashekar, and he asked Chandrashekar to go to Shantipur, where Advaitacharya was. He told him there to tell, please, Advaitacharya to meet him on the bank of the Ganges on the western side with fresh cloth for Chaitanya, because Lord Chaitanya had just taken sannyas, so he didn't even have a change of undergarments. So he just had one outfit. And he said, after you tell Advaitacharya to meet us on the western side of Ganges, then you go to Navadvip and bring Sachimata and the devotees from Navadvip, because they had all heard that Lord Chaitanya had taken sannyas, but none of them had seen Lord Chaitanya since he had taken. But of course, it is generally forbidden for a sannyasi to meet his ex-wife or his mother and family, because that's the whole idea of taking sannyas, is you detach yourself from your relatives and acquaintances and immediate family, and you travel through the world. And the purpose of sannyas is to fully dedicate oneself to Krishna. The purpose is not to meditate on the impersonal one. And in the purport, Prabhupada explains that this is actually what makes the sannyas, not the dress, not the danda. Prabhupada explains a bit about the idea of Mayavadi sannyasis carrying one danda, but that Vaishnava sannyasis carry a tree danda, and actually, like, there's four dandas that the Mayavadis imagine that they're going to become one with the Supreme, and that's the symbology of their one danda. Whereas Vaishnavas, they carry a tree dandi, which signifies serving the Supreme with body, mind, and words. So they have three sticks. And actually, there's a fourth one that represents the jiva, how that works. And then Prabhupada explains about how this is the real qualification of a sannyasi, that he's serving Krishna with body, mind, and words. In other words, he's dedicated to preaching mission, and not to some solitary focus on becoming one with Brahman. And then he explains, Prabhupada purport, that as time would go on, that there was a Swami named Shiva Swami who made an important, effort to dissuade people, and many became Mayavadis. And in this way, many people were diverted from the proper understanding of Krishna consciousness, and instead became Mayavadi sannyasi. So Lord Chaitanya had accepted the role of a sannyasi. Now he was traveling, trying to go to Vrindavan, but he'd been diverted by Nityananda. Had set up this ruse where Lord Chaitanya would get a chance to one last time meet his mother and residents of Navadvip, who we would never see again, at least on a regular basis. So when Nityananda said, "Oh, look, here is the Jamuna," and Lord Chaitanya made his prayers, and then after making the prayers, Lord Chaitanya took his bath in the Ganga, thinking it was Jamuna. And as he sat there, because Nityananda had arranged it, Advaitacharya came up to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with fresh cloths. And Lord Chaitanya saw Advaita, and he said, "Advaita, how did you know I was in Vrindavan? And how have you come to be here?" And Advaitacharya said, "My Lord, wherever you are is Vrindavan." And so at this point, Lord Chaitanya figured out that he'd been tricked by Nityananda, and he became a little angry. Nityananda has tricked me, that this is not Vrindavan. Advaitacharya protested. He said, "My dear Lord, this is at Prayag. We know that the Jamuna and the Ganga come together, and on the western side, the Jamuna flows, on the eastern side, the Ganga flows. So indeed, you are on the western side of the Ganga. You are taking bath in Jamuna. So what you have heard from Nityananda is correct. So he said, by the way, after you take your bath, here is some fresh cloth. And in my house, in Chandrapur, we have just prepared palmful of rice. And we have also made some vegetables, but we never make anything fancy. We just make some boiled vegetables with a little bit of spicing, and that's all. So please come and take prasadam with us. Come and take prasadam after you take your bath. So Lord Chaitanya took his bath, he changed his cloth, and he went with it Vaitacharya. And then it mentions all the amazing preparations that they were making. It was totally unlike the way that Advaitacharya had presented it. They were making all kinds of various preparations of every description. Advaita's wife was cooking and she was making all kinds of preparations, and there were other preparations being brought. So it mentions that there was shukta and tola and various cakes and stock. There was vegetables of various kinds, both vegetables that were mostly watery and ones that were more solid. And we hear about various kinds of squashes, and it's this entire menu. Why is it charged? I've only cooked a palmful of rice and some simple vegetables. We never make anything fancy. This is what I guess he said that so that Lord Chaitanya would not reject the offer of eating, thinking, oh, this would be too opulent for him. Now he was a sannyasi, so he was supposed to take very, very simple foods. So in this way, Advaitacharya lured Lord Chaitanya to his home, where there was this making of prasadam. And then it mentions in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that there was a system. And that was that at that time, Advaitacharya separated the offering that was going to be made into three sections. And in Bengali, this is called Adhaila, which means not really separation, but increasing. So the concept of separating out some bhoga to offer to the Supreme is called increasing the prasad. So he made one section which would be put on a metal plate to be offered to Krishna, and then two sections that would be put on banana leaves, not just any banana, but a banana leaf that came from a banana plant that had at least 32 bunches. I'm always amazed at what fascination the Vedic culture has with powers of two, 8, 16, 32. These are all reoccurring numbers. It has to be 32 bunches of bananas. If a banana leaf came from a banana tree that only had 31 bunches of bananas, it would be unacceptable. So it had to be 32 big banana leaves. So, and of course, the idea was he was setting aside one portion that would be offered to Krishna on the altar, and one portion that would eventually be offered to Nityananda, and another portion would be offered to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So these were set aside. So the two portions that were offered to Nityananda, Chaitanya, were on banana leaves. Offering on the actual tray or plate was for Krishna. So then there was a kirtan. And just like we just sang Gaur Artik, the Gaur Artik song from the Gita Bali by Bhakti Thakur, describes this process of offering, glorifying the Supreme Lord, and so on and so forth. So this was very similar to that arrangement, that there was a artik, and there was offering of boga, and then after that boga was offered, then Advaitacharya asked Nityananda and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to please come and take their prasad. So he asked them to come, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu invited Mukunda and Haridas Thakur. And Mukunda, he said, "My dear Lord, I am in the middle of doing something. I cannot eat now, but you please take your prasadam and I will come later." And Haridas said, "Well, actually, my dear Lord, I'm not worthy actually to eat with you all. I will take separate outside." Because of course Haridas had come from a Muslim family, and therefore at that time it was customary that those who were not proper would not eat together with the others, but would be given some prasad outside. So this is what Haridas Thakur had suggested. And when they arrived, because Lord Chaitanya had been walking in his ecstasy, his mad ecstasy, for many days, he had not eaten anything in 3 days. So Nityananda also had not eaten anything. And so Advaitacharya had invited them to eat, and he invited Lord Chaitanya. He said, "Please sit and take your prasad." And Lord Chaitanya saw the 3 offerings, one on the metal plate and leaves. And he said, "Well, just give me a little of the rice and some boiled vegetable." And Advaitacharya said, "My dear Lord, please do not make some fuss or some trick. I know that you eat 52 preparations every day." So he was referring to Lord Chaitanya. Jagannath, the temple of Jagannath is offered all these opulent foods. This is not even a morsel for you, that you can eat much more than this. So please do not make some artificial pretext here, that actually just kindly take your prasadam. And so, although this is the way Lord Chaitanya saw it, Nityananda looked and said, "Today I had planned to break my fast, but I see there's almost no food here." I was very, very hungry, and I seen that there's almost nothing to eat. And Advaitacharya said to Nityananda, "My dear Nityananda, please give up your greedy mentality of wanting opulent foods. You are a reject Paramahamsa. You are wandering. Nobody knows what your caste or class is. That you are accustomed to fill your belly however it is. And I am a poor Brahmana. I don't have lots of money to give you the quantity of rice that you require. So just take whatever I have given you and be satisfied. Give up your mentality of wanting more." So in this way, there was some joking back and forth. And eventually, Lord Chaitanya would eat, but he would eat half of what was given him, and then immediately away to try to fill it up again. And Lord Chaitanya kept objecting, but Advaitacharya kept adding more and more. And in this way, it goes on mentioning more different preparations. They made various sweets and various burfi kinds of cakes and things. And Lord Chaitanya was eating all these things. And then Nityananda said, so today I have hoped for eating something. I ate some of it, but I was not given as much as I really needed. So please take this all away. Hasn't satisfied me at all. I'm completely frustrated. And I have not eaten in any of it in the least bit. And then in anger, Nityananda took some of the rice and he threw it around. Some of the rice touched the body of Advaitacharya. Advaitacharya danced in ecstasy because the rice had touched the body of his body from the transcendental hand of Nityananda. And it mentions, of course, that Advaitacharya was kind of symbolically here a smarta. You know, smartas mean that there is a class of brahmanas who are very careful about following what we call the principles of pravriti. So the Vedic literatures are divided into two grand sections. One of them is pravriti marg, and the other is nivriti marg. So pravriti marg is the path of doing various rituals and pious activities so that one will gain benedictions in this world and possibly go to the heavenly planet. And so the smartas are very expert in understanding the details of these rituals, how to gain punya, how to get various good karma, but these are not at all important. Vaishnavas are actually interested in nivriti marg, which is the process of learning how to gradually give up one's attachment for material life, for material things, and become immersed in the process of serving the Supreme Lord, of serving Krishna. Well, this is actually what the nivriti marg is all about. So Advaita here was being described as a smarta Brahman by Nityananda. And by throwing the rice, Nityananda destroyed Advaitacharya's smarta principles. But Advaitacharya was actually very happy. And Nityananda is considered an avadut, which means that sometimes in the process of spiritual life, a person becomes completely lost in their relationship with Krishna and therefore behaves in ways that are incomprehensible to the common people. You know, we have the 4 varnas and the 4 ashrams. The 4 varnas are Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra. And the 4 ashrams are Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanapastha, and Sannyas. So the avadut is kind of not in any of those categories. And Nityananda was certainly an avadut. He was not recognizable in any kind of way. He did all kinds of bizarre things. And it's interesting that you would meet somebody who is this much of a wild card. And Nityananda, though, was able to give love of God, which is why sometimes certain classes of people would reject Nityananda because they would see him as a crazy person. So they would very respectfully worship Lord Chaitanya, but they would reject Nityananda. And to this, Lord Chaitanya was explaining that one is accepting the logic of half a hen, that one cannot accept Chaitanya and reject Nityananda. They are one. And if one cannot understand Nityananda, then one will not understand Lord Chaitanya. And one will certainly not get the mercy of Lord Chaitanya if one offends Nityananda. So Nityananda is, of course, Balaram. So we have Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Radha Krishna Nahi Anya. That Lord Chaitanya is Radha and Krishna in one body, but Nitai is Balaram. So he is the giver of spiritual Shakti. He is the original spiritual master. And though Nityananda appeared very eccentric, he was the one who decided to try to convert the two brothers, Jagai and Madai. That's another story. But the mercy of Lord Chaitanya can only be had by someone who gets the mercy of Nityananda. So Nityananda here is being glorified through these joking words, although both Nityananda and Advaitacharya are insulting each other. Nityananda is calling Advaitacharya a smarta, and at the same time, Advaita is calling Lord Nityananda reject Paramahamsa. So they are actually glorifying each other. So it appears, again, on the surface, there is some kind of, argument going on here, but in fact, it's not at all as it appears. They're really glorifying and appreciating. Now, after this episode took place where Advaitacharya had some rice thrown and he began to dance in ecstasy, then Chandrashekar arrived along with Sachimata and some of the residents of Navadvip. And when Lord Chaitanya saw his mother, he began to cry. Sachimata began to cry too. Lord Chaitanya fell like a dunda in front of her. And she said, what will become of me? Please do not be cruel like your brother was, and I will never see you again. And Lord Chaitanya said, you are my mother, I have to do whatever you say. And I owe you my body, what can I say? And then Lord Chaitanya said, however, I have just taken sannyas, and if I stay home, people will criticize. So Sachimata said, it's true that if you go away, I will feel brokenhearted. I will not be able to see you. But if you stay and people are criticizing you, that will also be great pain for me. The Lord Chaitanya said, then please think, my dear mother, how I can fulfill your desire and at the same time not be criticized by common people. So Lord Chaitanya makes this statement. But for 10 days, Lord Chaitanya stays in the house of Advaitacharya, and there they have incredible prasadam, and they dance and chant all day long, and there is amazing kirtan. And finally, Sachimata, she thinks, actually, my dear Lord, instead of going to Vrindavan, why don't you go to Jagannath Puri? Because Navadvip and Jagannath Puri are like two rooms in the same house, and people are always going between the two. That way, if you make your headquarters Jagannath Puri, you will get the darshan of Lord Jagannath, and at the same time, people will come from Jagannath Puri and tell me pastimes of what you're doing there. And Also, some of the people here in Navadvip will journey to Jagannath Puri, and they will get your association as well. So please do this. And so Lord Chaitanya said, whatever you've said, it is like a Vedic injunction, it must be followed. So in this way, Lord Chaitanya accepted what Sachimata had put as a proposal. And indeed, he began to make preparations to leave. And in Vaitacharya said, please don't leave just yet. Stay for a few more days. So Lord Chaitanya agreed, and he stayed with Vaitacharya in his house, all the residents there, and it went on. But eventually, Lord Chaitanya said, now I will go to Jagannath Puri. So as he began to leave, all the residents in the house of Vaitacharya began to cry. They began to feel separation from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And a great wail went up in the house. But Lord Chaitanya paid absolutely no notice. The word used is nirapeksha. He was completely indifferent. And he left. And Prabhupada explains in the purports that in a similar way, everyone should eventually come to the realization that we are individual spirit souls. We are destined to serve Krishna, and we have to give up all sorts of mental concoctions about this material world and our desires and our plans, and et cetera, et cetera. And by degree, the process of Krishna consciousness helps us to make our path from being completely focused on our imagined position in the material world and our imagined plan for the material world, and a life of being fully dedicated to Krishna. So in this way, this chapter concludes, and it's interesting the various lessons contained within this chapter about taking sannyas, about the purpose of sannyas, about Lord Chaitanya's dealings with Nityananda, about Nityananda's tricking Lord Chaitanya to come to Shantipur and take his bath there. And then the amazing dinner that Advaitacharya made for Lord Chaitanya and Nityananda, and then their interactive pastimes. And of course, as Chaitanya stayed further in the house of Advaitacharya, Mother Sachi took over the cooking. So she was making the prasadam for everyone there. So she had the chance to see her son for the last time. And then eventually, Lord Chaitanya would make her understand that whenever she was cooking for him at home in Navadvip, that he would be eating it in Jagannath Puri. And so in this way, Lord Chaitanya was allowing his mother to stay connected. At the same time, he was following the order of sannyas. So any questions about any part of this passage? I'll see if I can answer them. It's a very neat pastime and very interesting interaction between devotees, of, particularly the Panchatattva.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. Such a great fortune to actually participate in Gaur Leela by your mercy. I was just thinking about one point which you mentioned. Mother Sachi made three sections.
It was Advaitacharya that did that.
Yes, sorry, Advaitacharya made three plates. One was in metal, and then another one was for Lord Chaitanya and one Nityananda. I was just confused about one thing. I'm just looking for clarity. When we go on the altar, we offer to Radha Gopi Jana Vallabha, and then we offer Mahaprasad later to Nityananda.
Well, this particular thing is not. This is not a standard deity worship process. This was just how Advaitacharya had divided things for the process of entertaining Chaitanya and Nityananda, so that there would be some for the deity, some for either of them. Of course, Lord Chaitanya assumed the whole thing was for the Lord, that there was nothing for him. He didn't recognize that the ones on the banana leaf were actually intended for him and for Nityananda. But of course, Advaita Acharya gave him joking words about that, saying, please give up this pretense and just take your prasadam.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much
Hare
for
Krishna.
beautiful, again, chat. Very interesting. I found the concept of avaduta very interesting. Is that a desirable state of things? Should I seek to become completely mad in Krishna consciousness, or is that for such a being as that?
Well, it's not something that often happens. The process generally in Krishna consciousness is that someone starts off as unmarried and then becomes a householder, and gradually becomes vanaprastha. Sometimes goes forward into the process of sannyas. Now, previously, there was the process of taking Babaji initiation, which was done up until the time of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami's spiritual master. So Babaji initiation meant that one gave up Brahman thread, gave up any connection with the Varnashram system, and would perform nirjan bhajan, would go off by themselves and focus on just chanting. And usually that was a very secluded thing. They would do that in some place in Vrindavan, in some place on the bank of the Jamuna or Radhakunda, Shamakunda, or somewhere like that. Now, sometimes these Babajis could become very wild, because the idea was that they were totally focused on their relationship with Krishna, and the external material world became completely not a factor for them. So they sort of disappeared from our world, even though their bodies were still here. They disappeared from our world, and they began to become like Chaitanya, being totally mad in ecstasy of relating with Krishna. And this means that often their behavior and activities were incomprehensible. If you read pastimes of Gaurikishore Das Babaji, you'll realize that many things he did were completely incomprehensible to everyday people. In fact, oftentimes people would come to him and, ask for benedictions and so, but mostly they wanted material benedictions, and he became completely disgusted with that. So he began to do his chanting right next to a huge latrine where it smelled really bad. And he knew that materialistic people wouldn't go there to meet him there. And their accounts were he would be giving darshan to people or discussing with them, and suddenly he would break off the discussion, got a stick and would, shake the stick, and people are, does he want us to leave, or what was it? But he was actually chasing away a goat from eating tulsi plants in Vrindavan, which was hundreds of miles away. So it was completely, this is where the material world begins to be revealed in its non-existence, so only people at a very high level can actually grasp what's going on there. So many people misunderstood him. And he would say all kinds of enigmatic things. So he was kind of in that category of an avadut. Of course, Nityananda was extremely in that category, where he would do bizarre things just because he was Nityananda. And even Lord Chaitanya would sometimes get miffed with Nityananda. There was, of course, a time where Lord Chaitanya would, just after taking sannyas, he gave his danda to Nityananda to carefully protect. And then when he came out from taking his bath, he asked Nityananda where the danda was. Lord Nityananda said, I don't know. That was because Lord Nityananda had broken it in 3 pieces, thrown it in the water. Of course, the reason, here Lord Chaitanya specifically entrusts his danda to Nityananda protection, and Nityananda deliberately breaks it in 3 pieces, throws it in the Ganges. Of course, the reason he did that was that Lord Chaitanya had an ekadanda. And Lord Chaitanya was not an ekadanda, he was a tridanda. So Nityananda made it into 3 dandas, but then he felt, Nityananda felt that Lord Chaitanya didn't need to be carrying a danda at all. So he just got rid of it that way. And so at that point, Lord Chaitanya said to Nityananda, I don't want to go to Vrindavan with you. You are too crazy. So you please go somewhere else, but I'm not going to Vrindavan with you, and I'm not going to Vrindavan with any of you all. So Lord Chaitanya separated himself, whole group, and traveled to not Vrindavan, but to Jagannath-puri on his own. And of course, he arrived on his own before all the others. But Nityananda and all the others went together as a group. So Nityananda was known for these kind of eccentric behaviors because he is Balaram and he's having his own sports, his own ways of doing things. And this is the nature of an avadut. So this concept of an avadut is there, although it's rare. However, these are not to be confused with the tantric avaduts, who a completely different thing going on there. And their activities are not worth discussing at all, and they have very bad motivations in what they're doing, and their practice is not considered anything like Vaishnavism. So sometimes people do not make a distinction between Vaishnava avaduts, or those who are in a very high level of connection with Krishna, and these tantric avaduts, which are completely different. They're into mystic tantricism, which is all about all kinds of degraded activities. So that's a whole other world. So
Many thanks for that.
Hare Krishna.
Very amazing narration, and we could feel like actually we were there in the pastime. You took us to the pastime. It was so divine. So my question is that while reading Srila Prabhupada's books, whether it's any part of Srimad Bhagavatam or Chaitanya Charitamrita or even Bhagavad Gita, how to actually feel what's going on, because many times speaking for myself, this maybe at the most this touches the intellectually, but like the way you were speaking, it was actually touching the heart and you actually feel.
Well, if it's doing that, then you're getting more out of it than I'm getting out of it. So. Actually, I was just thinking about this the last month or so, that in Krishna consciousness, we read, we hear constantly about the love of Godhead. We hear about the amazing ecstasies that are available. We hear that the process of Krishna consciousness is 1,000,000 times more powerful than whatever experience you could have in Kaivalya or merging with the Supreme. And that in itself is a million times more powerful to get in material life. And we hear these things. And after a while, I tend to feel kind of jaded about the whole thing. This is describing a country or a land or a terrain or a environmental, emotional landscape that I can only understand in words. But there are times where a little bit of that reality peeks through. And you can see that this is not hyperbole. This is not an imagination. This is not some mythical land that never existed. This is actually real. But because of lifetime after lifetime of rejecting the Supreme Lord and trying to process our own mental understanding of what we think we want and who we think we are in the material world, because doing that lifetime after lifetime, we only hear this very dimly. But if we're chanting nicely and we're trying to please the Supreme Lord, in time, these things will come, as we were saying this morning, that there's 9-step process of spiritual maturity. And so through spiritual maturity, eventually the covering blanket of material separation is removed, and we begin to understand directly what we're really talking about in spiritual life. And we can contact in an emotional way those things that we hear about and those strange narrations that we can kind of listen to or read, but we can't project into, because again, we are so removed from that real emotional contact that's only there because of the presence of an artist in the heart. And as those become removed, then the genuine intensity shines through. And that's what we get with Lord Chaitanya. There was a time where he appears to be annoying scholar, to the point where eventually he goes into various ecstasies. We see in Anjalila, Chaitanya Charitamrita, where he performs all sorts of bizarre activities, because like Nityananda or these other avadhuts we're talking about, he is demonstrating what it's like for a person to finally be, even in this body, kind of leaving this world behind. So this world appears tangible and real, material world, and it's the only world we've known for many lifetimes. So this is the world our consciousness is saturated in. But actually, it's a fake virtual world. Outside that is the actual, real spiritual world. But we are completely cut off from that world because of our material plans and our material desires. But as those material desires switch, we begin to seep into that world. And we see how that's the real world, and this is the imaginary world. The world of everyday, material social dealings of society, friendship, and love that we come to recognize in the material world, lifetime after lifetime. So it's a gradual process, and I think everyone gets little, sprinkles, which is, as we hear that there is abhasya. So we have, as is described in the Harinam Chintamani, before the sun rises in the morning, there's already light and already the absence of dangerous wild animals and ghosts and other threats tend to dissipate. So we haven't seen the sun yet, but we know that it's morning because there is light. So this is called Abhasya. So similarly, the holy name, Namabhasya, is that twilight, that coming full sunrise of spiritual life, which will eventually fully manifest. But right now, it's only just beginning. The glimmers are there, and the brightness is there. All the negative aspects are gone. So this is how we know we're actually on the right path. We may not be seeing Radha and Krishna. We may not understand our eternal relationship, but all negative aspects of the material world are diminishing in the same way that the sunrise causes all these negative things to disappear. But eventually, the full sun will rise, and then that's Shuddhanam, or also our full recognition of our relationship with the Supreme Lord, that will eventually rise. And it's not an imagination or some kind of, what do they call them? Affirmation or something like that. It's a direct experience, but comes as our spiritual life matures.
Much blessings and holy book.
Yes, yes.
Well, I just had a follow-up question if nobody has a question.
Okay.
Very beautiful answer, Maharaj, and especially towards the end when you spoke about the twilight. There are two aspects which comes to my mind. I don't remember the exact instance, but one time Prabhupada was told by someone, when I chant, I had these experiences. Prabhupada said, you continue chanting, it will go away.
Right, right.
So as a sadhaka, and you said a beautiful point, some sparklers are there. How do I know whether those are just the emotion or just on the surface, or maybe it is a special mercy which is coming through? Sorry for this description.
Well, that instance that you talk about was, one time a young lady during the, early days of Prabhupada in New York City, saying that when I chant, I see purple and it's expanding, and I feel special energy. She was describing all these things. Just keep chanting, it will go away. So he was experiencing, things similar to what people experience when one takes psychedelic drugs and stuff. So that's what Prabhupada was referring to. But of course, the real psychedelia is when you connect with the spiritual world. And that is something that is really unmistakable. There's this verse that, what is it, Pushti Tushti, Shut Buddha, something like that, that when a person is hungry and you're eating food, you don't need someone to confirm that you're actually feeling satisfaction, nourishment, and relief from hunger. It's a direct experience. So when we come to the point of connecting with the spiritual world, it's not something that we have to sniff out. Of course, we may get some things which we're not sure whether they're leading us in the right direction, the wrong direction. In that case, we always refer to Guru Sadhana Shastra. If we have a dream or we have a realization, experience, and it confirms what we read in Guru Sadhana Shastra, then we know that it's helping us. If it seems to take us in some bleak or different direction, then we can be suspicious. So that's why these things confirm. But in the long run, when we come to genuine realization of the spiritual world, then it's like when you eat, nobody has to tell you you're satisfied. It's a direct experience. Okay, so thank you all very much for your kind attention. All glories to Chaitanya Charita, all glories to the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. May we all become spiritually purified in the process of hearing and chanting the mantra. Hare Krishna.
His Holiness Chandrashekar Swami Maharaj ki
Jai!
Maharaj also giving class tomorrow's Sunday.